The Supreme Court just did their final session of the season, ending before the big holiday, just like all of Congress. Everybody wants to go on their long, extended summer break. I mean, I can't say I blame them, but anyway, generally speaking, the Supreme Court does all of its worst rulings right before the 4th of July because they know that everybody's on vacation and nobody's paying attention, and they can get their worst rulings through with as few eyeballs on them as possible. Anyway, the big one that went through was this argument about birthright citizenship. Now, birthright citizenship is literally laid out in the Constitution on the 14th Amendment. You know, it says if you are born here, you are an American citizen. If you were born on American soil, you are a citizen. Now, I don't care how many Republicans say, oh, that was meant for slaves after, the Civil War, and that's it. No, honey, it is laid out in plain fucking English. But instead, the Supreme Court decided to argue something that is kind of tangential to the birthright citizenship. And that has got to do with whether or not a lower court, like a circuit court or appellate court, can do a nationwide injunction. If they see something illegal, a case comes before them and it is, the Trump administration is doing something illegal, they can use this case to stop all other cases that are like this. For instance, when Trump at the beginning of his term put 280 some immigrants on a plane and sent them down to El Salvador to go live in Bukele's dungeon, like it's fucking Auschwitz in Poland. A judge said, you can't do that. And they're like, hey, the plane's already in the air. He's like, I've already given my ruling. Turn it around. But the Trump administration, including Trump and Stephen Miller, both told him to basically fuck off, and they didn't follow that rule. Now, since then, a couple of those people have come back, including Abrego Garcia, and they're working to get back several of the other ones. And out of those 288, all of the research from so many news organizations found out that over 90% of them had not even committed a crime, not even a misdemeanor. So there was absolutely no reason to send them down there, but they did it anyway. Anyway, Donald Trump is tired of lower courts telling him he can't do anything, even though under Biden, like the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals would constantly rule against Joe Biden when it came to relieving student loan debt. They would step in there and you never hear a Republican or Fox News or Donald Trump or anybody complain about that. So when a lower court overruled Joe Biden, that's fine. But now that Donald Trump's in office, he doesn't want those lower courts to get in his way. And now that he's got a 6-3 advantage in the Supreme Court, and he got that big, hi, how you do handshake from Chief Justice John Roberts when he did the State of the Union and shaked his hand and said, thank you so much for what you did for me. I'll never forget it. When basically the Supreme Court said, if the president does something and he says that he thinks it's presidential, then it's not illegal. So they just basically said, if you're the president, you cannot commit a crime. Richard Nixon is literally rolling over in his grave. But that's not what this is about. This right here is about allowing lower courts to overrule his executive orders. None of this stuff goes through Congress. All of these things are executive orders from the president. So I don't want to hear any of this shit. They're going against the law. Honey, there are 3 equal branches of government. Each one of them has checks and balances over the other. It's the Constitution, the thing that you're always talking about, law and order and the Constitution, except the parts that I don't like, the parts that get in my way. We got to get rid of that stuff. We should suspend the Constitution until we can figure out what is going on and put me back in office, because I think it's only fair, even though you had 60 court cases back in 2020, 60 court cases that got thrown out, half of which were by MAGA judges that you picked. And they said, no, Mr. President, you can't do this. No, Rudy Giuliani, you have no standing. Get the fuck out of my court. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm going off on a tangent here. But the Supreme Court just ruled that now lower courts don't have any control over making a national mandate on Donald Trump's illegal executive orders. A judge, a circuit court judge, or any federal court judge can make a ruling about one thing in particular, that one case, but none of it goes to any of the other similar cases around the country. So now you are intentionally, yet again, adding more bureaucracy, because Republicans love the bureaucracy. Even though they blame it on Democrats, Republicans love bureaucracy. Now you are adding more to the court docket. And if you, a citizen, you as somebody who is fighting for citizenship or fighting for your rights, you used to be able to go to a court and prove your case. And if you proved your case and it was of national concern, then that would cover everybody in the country that had an applicable case to yours. But now it is just for you. And if you are trying to, renew your green card, or prove that you're a citizen, or trying to maintain your status as an asylum seeker in this country, a judge can rule for you, but none of that is applicable to anybody else. So now, if you have enough money to be able to go to court and have a ruling in your favor, then maybe you got a shot. But if you don't have any money for a lawyer and you can't have your case, and by the way, Clarence Thomas said, we can't have any, I'm giving him the Donald Trump voice, sorry. But Clarence Thomas said, there's not going to be any of this class action lawsuit stuff. The Democrats love their class action lawsuits. Yeah, it's because motherfuckers like you are constantly trying to apply bullshit ass laws to everybody, and it takes a large sum of people who don't have a lot of money to put together a class action lawsuit to go against your insane rulings. I mean, you're giving us no other recourse. But now Clarence Thomas and Alito are both saying, no, you can't do class action lawsuits. So everybody's got to do this individually. And this is going to be their loophole. And until this case comes back to the Supreme Court, which, by the way, could take a year, 2 years, 3 years. Trump could be out of office by the time it comes back around. Donald Trump and Stephen Miller are going to be able to continue with their fuckery. That was the whole thing. If a judge from a circuit court or a lower federal court says you can't do this until it gets adjudicated by the Supreme Court, or it works its way up to the Supreme Court, you have to stop the actions that you are doing until that decision is reached. But now it doesn't seem to matter anymore. And according to the Supreme Court, you cannot do a nationwide injunction. So this is their way of allowing the Trump administration to continue kicking people out of the country without any due process. And no circuit court can stop the president from doing it anymore. So that's one of the cases. One of the other ones was, I believe it was in 2023, it was a Telvesky case where the government, you had the right to sue the government for your civil rights. And this was like, I think it was like an 1871 First Amendment right law that they upheld in 2023. This very same Supreme Court upheld in 2023. Now this 2025, now they're saying you do not have the right to sue. And, they've already beaten the Warren Court. The Warren Court was one of the, I would say probably the best Supreme Court that we had. It had Thurgood Marshall, had Justice Warren, and that was when we had an expansion of civil rights. They've already beaten most of those civil rights court cases out now. Our current Supreme Court has beaten them, and now they're trying to march it back to Civil War era stuff like antebellum laws. They're literally arguing slavery era antebellum laws. And now it's up to individuals to sue individually for their own civil rights. Remember that movie 12 Years a Slave? Chiwetel Ejiofor, he's a free man up north, and for some reason or the other, I can't remember exactly the story, but he is kind of deceived to go down south to, I don't know, advocate for somebody else's freedom. But when he goes down south, he is snatched up and he's thrown, into slavery for 12 years. A free man up north, down south, is not free. So, when it comes to birthright citizenship, the same thing is applicable. If you are born in a blue state after June 25th of this year, if you're born in the blue state on American soil, you're a citizen. But if you're born in Texas and both of your parents are not American citizen, maybe one of your parents is American citizen and one of them is from Mexico or Guatemala or something, then you do not have citizenship. How are they going to handle that at the hospital? I don't know. But it is now up in the air. And there's, yet again, it's like the abortion, it's Roe versus Wade overturning. It's with Dobbs. It's that we have sent it back to the state. So depending on what state you were born in could very well determine whether or not you're a citizen or not, even if you're born on American soil. This is the kind of stuff that led to the Civil War. But anyway, there's an article here I got. Hold on, let me get it. What is birthright citizenship and what happens after the Supreme Court ruling? After the Supreme Court issued a ruling that limits the ability of federal judges to issue universal injunctions, but did not rule on the legality of Donald Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship, because it is literally in plain English in the Constitution. If you're born on American soil, you're an American citizen. And they're desperately trying to not have that conversation. So they're trying to give Donald Trump a win without overturning the actual Constitution. Immigrants' rights groups are trying a new tactic by filing a national class action lawsuit. And I told you that Clarence Thomas is doing everything he can to make sure that doesn't happen. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of two immigrant rights organizations whose members include people without legal status in the United States who have had or will have children born in the United States after February 19th, 2025, according to court documents. One of the lawyers, but now that they ruled on it, and it was ruled on June 25th, so now if you're in a red state if you're born on June 26th, your citizenship is in question. And look, honey, it's not going to just stop here. You think that Donald Trump is going to stop with this little win? He wants more. They will add on to it. We're only 6 months into his second term. There is no way he's going to stop with that one. He's going to keep pushing as far as he can fucking push. One of the lawyers representing the plaintiffs, William Powell, senior counsel at the Institute of Constitutional Advocacy and Protection at Georgetown Law, says his colleagues at CASA Inc. and the Asylum Seeker Advocacy Project think that with the class action approach, we will be able to get complete relief for everyone who would be covered by the executive order. So complete relief is going back to the status quo of if you were born on American soil, you are a citizen. Goddamn anchor babies. The strategic shift required 3 court filings, one to add class allegations to the initial complaint, a second to move for class certification, and a third asking a district court in Maryland to issue a temporary restraining order to preliminary injunctions asking for relief of that punitive class. In the amended complaint filed 2 hours after the Supreme Court ruling, the immigrants' right attorney said that Trump's effort to ban birthright citizenship, if allowed to stand, would throw into doubt the citizenship status of thousands of children across the country. Many children are born every day, and some of them have immigrant parents. Let's not forget, Donald Trump's first wife, Ivana, was not a citizen. when she gave birth to all 3 of her children. Does that count? For some reason, I think it doesn't. Maybe it's got something to do with the color of their skin. I'm just spitballing. The executive order threatens these newborns' identity as United States citizens and interferes with their employment of full privileges, rights, and benefits that come with U.S. citizenship, including calling into question their ability to remain in the country of their birth. I mentioned in a story last week sometime that 700 American citizens have already been arrested by DHS and ICE. And out of the 700, 70 of them have been deported. So we've already deported American citizens. It will get worse. Rights groups in 22 states had to ask federal judges to block President Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship issued on his first day in office. The executive order states the 14th Amendment has never been interpreted to extend citizenship universally to everyone born in the United States. Yes, it does. Read the fucking amendment. But after 3 federal district court judges separately blocked Trump's order, issuing universal injunctions preventing its enforcement nationwide, the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court to block universal injunctions altogether, and they did. The Supreme Court did not rule on the birthright issue itself, but after the ruling, Trump called it a monumental victory for the Constitution. It is literally the exact opposite. I feel like I'm living in Orwell's 1984. Black is white, up is down, right is wrong, and peace through strength. The Supreme Court did not, the president said the ruling means his administration can now move forward with his efforts to fundamentally reshape longstanding U.S. policy on the immigration and citizenship. He wants to change the goddamn Constitution without actually doing that, without actually going through the legal means to do that. If you wanted to do that, you would have to get 33 states to approve it and 38 to ratify it to change the Constitution. But he ain't going to do that shit. He's just an executive order guy, and he's already bought the Supreme Court. That's my court, folks. They're going to do it. I tell them to. And he's not wrong, because they seem to be bending over backwards for him. Even Amy Coney Barrett, who seemed to, when they were hearing the case and hearing Trump's lawyer argue this case, they were saying, none of this makes sense. You know, you are saying that depending on the state, you know, citizenship could be up for debate. And then all of a sudden she decides, okay, I'm down. I think Donald Trump is right. So 6-3 voted against. Voted to give Donald Trump this executive power and voted against the lower courts overruling it. It is absolutely troubling. There's one other case, which is kind of weird. Justice Alito. Last week I was talking about Alito and I forgot the guy's name. I will never forget it again. Anyway, Alito, he was ruling on this case. It's called the Mahmoud versus Taylor case. And it is about whether or not a parent can direct a public school to not teach their kids certain things. Now, back in my day, if you didn't want your kids learning that weird public school stuff, you had the option to keep them home and do some homeschooling. You know, if you were a full-on Christian, by the way, I was raised Christian. I did homeschooling for a couple of years until I begged to go back to public school because I was kind of sick of it. But nevertheless, that used to be your option. If you didn't like public school, then don't put your kid in public school. Put them in a private school or homeschool them. You know, you do not have the right to tell a public school teacher or a public school official or a whole a whole regional public school system, you are not allowed to teach this anymore because of my religious beliefs or, whatever beliefs that I have. Well, if you got problems with the public school, teach your fucking kids at home, you selfish bastard. But no, no, no. According to this case, the Mahmoud versus Taylor case, you as a parent can now say certain things that you teach, certain books that you teach, you're not allowed to do that. And if you bring a case against them, then now you have teachers and school administrations are now having to ask all of their students' parents, is it okay if I teach them this? Is it okay if I teach them that? What are you going to do? Every day go through your student planning and before the day starts, make phone calls to all the parents? Is it all right if I teach this, your son or daughter this particular math thing? Or should I, am I allowed to read this aloud in class? I mean, this is what we've gotten to. And the story was over this book called Uncle Bobby's Wedding. And this is, it would be hilarious if it wasn't true. Uncle Bobby is a gay man. Now, they don't make a lot of mention to it. It's from the perspective of Uncle Bobby's little niece. I'm having a hard time remembering her name, but the niece she's a little upset, not at Uncle Bobby marrying another man, but that Uncle Bobby's not going to be around anymore to play with me because he was my favorite uncle, and we would play and, he was so nice. I love my uncle. And now he's not going to be spending so much time with me because he's getting married. And Alito, his idea is that, that this young girl, she's not upset that she's not going to get to play with her cool uncle anymore, or he's not going to play with her anymore. She's upset that he's marrying a man. He completely misinterprets it. And if you read the book, it is very specific. I'm sad because my Uncle Bobby is not going to be able to hang out with me anymore. It's not got anything to do with the fact that he was gay. But Alito used that, his own imagination, to interpret this shit. And that was the reasoning behind allowing teachers to not teach certain things in school, and parents to say to teachers, you can't teach this anymore. So Uncle Bobby's Wedding was really upset. And I heard somebody make an analogy to it I thought was pretty funny. Say you're Jewish and you don't celebrate Christmas because you're Jewish. You celebrate Hanukkah, but not Christmas. So as a Jewish parent of a school-age child going through public school, are you allowed to go, you can't have a Christmas tree in class. You can't have, Christmas decorations. You can't read Christmas stories to your kids because my kid is Jewish and I don't want them to be hearing any of this Christmas Christianity shit. Now, you would think if they were following the letter of this new law that the court and Alito has passed, you would think what is good for the goose is good for the gander. But we are talking about Justice Alito, staunchly Christian Catholic guy. Do you think that shit would wash? I mean, it's like I was saying earlier about the courts putting injunctions on the president. None of them had a problem with the lower courts putting injunctions on Biden when it came to student loan relief. I had no problem with that shit. You didn't hear a hide in the hair of them. But now that it's happening to Donald Trump, or it's going against their Christian beliefs, and Alito is a complete homophobe. He hates the gays. His wife is absolutely batshit crazy. She's been caught on hot mics screaming and yelling about her neighbors across her pond are flying the gay pride flag during Gay Pride Month. And she's so mad. And she's like, I cannot wait for Alito to be out of office because I'm going to make a flag of my own. And it's going to be white and it's going to have orange flames on it. And it's going to say Vergogna. And I don't know if you know this, but Vergogna in Italian is shame. And I'm going to fly that flag. She was also Alito's wife was also the woman who flew the flag upside down. And if you're not a wonk about politics like I am, justices, especially Supreme Court justices, are not supposed to be wearing their political beliefs on their sleeve. You know, you're giving the game away. All of them are always talking about Democrats are activist judges. These are the most activist judges I've ever seen. They are bending over backwards. They're greasing themselves up and allowing Donald Trump to enter them at will at all times and then leave a hot mess on their back and walk out the door. These people are complete right-wing hack activist judges, without a doubt. And his wife flew a flag, the American flag, upside down, which is notoriously means that, you know, we're under stress. And, you know, you don't do that kind of willy-nilly. And when Alito was asked about it, he immediately threw his wife under the bus and goes, I didn't have anything to do with that. That was my wife. Whatever, dog. Whatever. Anyway, both he and his wife are batshit crazy. They're both seriously homophobic. They really do hate the gays. And this right here is just another cut into the LGBT rights. So they managed to do quite a bit of damage in their last session as Supreme Court justices for this year's session. And now they're all going on vacation, and they're going to have a good time. They're going to hit the beach, and maybe Alito's wife will get her flag made and be waving around her little Virginia flag. Now that gay pride is over with, I wonder if she's just going to walk over next door and just wave the flag in their face and go, Virginia, Virginia, because she's fucking batshit crazy. And so is Alito. And honestly, so is Justice Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Coney Barrett, and for good measure, Chief Justice John Roberts. However moderate people want to portray him, he is allowing this shit to happen. He is allowing Donald Trump to just rip up the Constitution and do whatever the fuck he wants. He is allowing Donald Trump to be the king that he always wanted to be. And they're doing all of this to maintain their Supreme Court legitimacy, because they're so deathly afraid that Donald Trump is going to be like, you rule against me, you and what army? I'm just not going to follow it. And, you know, who's to say that you get to stay Supreme Court justice? I'm the king, remember? If I say it's presidential, then it's presidential. So if I take you out on the White House lawn and execute you, you know, hey, you know, what do I get? I mean, what can I do? I'm the king. Anyway, it's pretty shitty. The Supreme Court, they're a wretched bunch, man. And it doesn't matter what Sotomayor says or Justice Jackson have to say. They did write some scathing, you know, rebuttals in their dissent to all of these cases, but it doesn't really matter because they have a supermajority in the Supreme Court. And whatever Donald Trump wants, unfortunately, they're giving it to him. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like and subscribe. Keep rocking.